All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to unpack a really powerful idea that's shaking up how we think about public services. It's called co-production, and we're going to figure out what it really means. Just think about that for a second. Seriously, what if you weren't just a client or a student or a resident on the receiving end of things? What if you were an active partner in creating the very services you rely on every day? That's the big, game-changing idea we're digging into. So, at its heart, co-production is all about collaboration. It's this idea, which is actually pretty simple but also really profound, that public services just plain work better when the people using them are involved in making them. And we're not just talking about filling out a survey. We're talking about rolling up your sleeves and actively contributing. And let me tell you, the hopes for this idea are huge. You've got policymakers looking at it as a way to build trust, to use resources a lot more wisely, and, to create services that actually solve the right problems for people. The potential feels absolutely enormous. But, and there's always a but, right? There's a problem. As this idea of co-production got more and more popular, the meaning started to get a little, fuzzy. It kind of feels like everyone's using the exact same word, but they're talking about totally different things. So, for example, is a patient who's actively working with their therapist to shape their own treatment doing the same thing as a citizen who serves on a hospital's advisory board? I mean, both are super valuable, for sure. But when we call them both co-production, it just creates a ton of confusion. It makes it almost impossible to figure out what actually works and what doesn't. To cut through all this fog, a couple of researchers, Diają�rent and Marlies Honing, basically decided to become detectives. They went all the way back to the classic, original definitions of the term to try and find its true DNA. And they were really systematic about it. First, they dug into the foundational work from pioneers in the field, like Elinor Ostrom. Next, they zeroed in on those specific words that were causing all the confusion. And then, with all that groundwork laid, they built a brand new, much sharper definition from scratch. And here it is. Look at how specific this is. It's about a direct relationship between an employee and a citizen, and it requires an active contribution from that citizen to the actual work of the organization. You see how that immediately cuts out those more indirect things like being on a board or doing general advocacy? Okay, but this is where the story gets really cool. The researchers had this breakthrough moment where they realized that all that old confusion, it wasn't just noise, it wasn't a mistake. The different ways people were using the term were actually clues, pointing to a much deeper, hidden structure. The first big clue was all about design. It boiled down to this question. Are citizens only involved in carrying out a service that's already been planned out for them? Or are they actually at the table helping to design how that service is going to work in the first place? And the second clue was about proximity. Is what the citizen is doing part of the organization's main job? The teaching in a school, the healing in a hospital? Or is it more of a complementary activity, something that supports that core mission, like fundraising or organizing a special event? So when you take these two clues and you put them together, that's what unlocks the whole puzzle. Imagine a simple grid. On one side, you've got citizen involvement, ranging from just implementing to full-on design. And on the other side, you've got how close that activity is to the main purpose, from complementary to core. And right where they intersect, we find 4 totally distinct phases of co-production. This gives us a brilliant map showing what the researchers call the 4 phases of co-production. So let's walk through them one by one. First up, let's look at the top left quadrant. This is where the action is happening, right within the core mission of the service. This is where a citizen's participation is absolutely essential for the service to even happen, but they don't really have a say in designing it. The best example? A classroom. The teacher sets the lesson plan, right? But if the students don't actively engage, if they don't listen, ask questions, do the assignments, then zero learning happens. Their participation, their co-production, is just baked right into the process. But what if citizens get to help design that core service and not just participate in it? Well, that takes us over to type 2. Now, this is the deepest, most intensive level of collaboration you can get. The citizen is a genuine partner. A perfect example of this is a patient working with a dietitian. They don't just get a generic meal plan handed to them. No, they sit down together to co-design a personalized health plan, and then they work together to make it happen. The patient's knowledge of their own life is just as important as the dietitian's expertise. Okay, let's shift gears and look at activities that support the core mission. This brings us to type 3.
Here, citizens are helping carry out tasks that someone else has already designed.
Think about parents helping out with the annual school play. They're not teaching drama, that's the teacher's core job. But they might be building the set, sewing costumes, or selling tickets, all based on what the teacher has asked for. It's super helpful, it supports the main event, but the parents aren't directing the play. And that brings us to our final quadrant, Type 4. This is where citizens don't just help out with supporting tasks, they actually take the lead in creating brand new ones. This is where citizens are both designing and delivering complementary services all on their own. Let's stick with the school example. This isn't just helping with the play anymore. This is a group of parents who decide, hey, let's organize a school science fair, or let's plan a big field trip. They come up with the idea, they do all the planning, they run the whole thing. They are co-producing a whole new, valuable experience that complements the school's core mission. So there you have it, the 4 phases of co-production. It's a neat little model, but you might be asking, so what? Why does having this map actually matter in the real world? Well, this framework brings some badly needed clarity. For researchers, it means they can finally compare apples to apples when they study this stuff. For policymakers, it means they can be way more intentional and ask, okay, what type of co-production are we trying to foster here? And maybe most importantly, it helps all of us ask smarter, better questions, like who really benefits from each of these different types? Because this map, it does more than just clear up some academic debate. It gets us a brand new lens for seeing our own communities. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Now that you have the map, where do you see these 4 phases of co-production at work in your world? And maybe more importantly, where's the biggest opportunity to create more?